I went to a school in Ohio. I went to like kind of a small school in Ohio. But my whole life, my whole family, everyone said to me, "You're going to love college, Caleb. You're just going to love college. It's going to be so amazing. You're a bookish kind of guy. You read. You're always talking. You're going to love college." I hated college. I'll just tell you the truth. I didn't like it at all. But the reason that my relatives and my parents and my aunts and my uncles were all telling me I was going to love college is because the role of universities has drastically changed in the United States in the past 20 to 30 years. It used to be the universities were a place of dissident thought. It used to be they were kind of the place that was where you would go to be exposed to new ideas, to question things. It was a place for the folks who thought a little bit deeper than average folks. Now it's not like that at all. If you look at the role the universities play, it's the opposite. Average Americans who haven't been to college are sick of these wars. They want the troops home from Afghanistan. They're happy the USA has pulled out. They don't want the USA meddling in the affairs of countries around the world. It's Americans who've been to college and taken international studies and think that they're educated, who've been informed about why it is we have to have troops in Afghanistan, and why it is that we need to overthrow the government of Nicaragua, and why it is that Russia and China are a threat. And instead of being a place for people to learn to think more broadly and question things, universities are increasingly becoming a place that people are essentially taught the party line of the ruling elite so that they can be a trusted part of this professional managerial class. And it's the opposite of the role that they historically played. And that's what universities are doing. And part of that is creating an infantilizing environment. I'm a leftist, and I'll tell you, I never want to hear anybody ever say, now, if you hear me clap once, if you hear me clap twice, if you hear me clap 3 times, I never want to hear that again. And, I talked to, older folks when I was in college. The college librarian was a good friend of mine. He was a guy who spoke Chinese and Vietnamese fluently and had traveled the world. And he said, when I went to college, it was pretty basic. Here's your room in the dorm. Here are your books. Start studying. But this kind of infantilizing environment they create that also comes with kind of the political correctness and all of that. It's all about kind of creating an atmosphere where people are afraid to think for themselves. People learn to obey authority, and they learn to be trusted enough to become, architects and engineers of empire, and preside over this decaying international financial system that Wall Street and London sit at the center of. They talk about how there are different models of global trade. There's the Eurasian model, which is historically that's Russia and China and the way that they've worked. And then there's what you call the Atlanticist model. And the Atlanticist model is when you basically have an economy that is centered around control of the trade routes, where you have big cities that are at the center of finance that dominate the trade routes and enrich themselves by controlling global trade, maintaining a monopoly. That's how the Roman Empire operated. They said all roads lead to Rome. What that meant was if you were in one part of the empire and you wanted to build a road to another part of the empire, you couldn't do it because Rome had to be the middleman in global trade. That's how Wall Street and London operate. And they don't mind seeing the world get poorer and poorer and poorer, just so long as they can be the giant middleman. But the Eurasian model, where development is essential, and you have kind of the idea of bringing parts of the globe together, right? China, they're really into one China. The reason for that is because historically the way China has been impoverished is when they divide it. When Tibet is separate, when the Uyghur regions are separate, when Hong Kong is separate, when Taiwan is separate, it's poor. But when they're together, pulling together, they can start to economically develop. That's why you can see one of the most famous movies from Russia that came out during World War II. It's called Ivan the Terrible, and it's about Tsar Ivan who brought Russia together, and by doing that was able to raise people up. And that the Eurasian model for international relations, what China is doing with their One Belt, One Road initiative, what Russia is doing with the Eurasian Economic Union, what's going on with the Bolivarian alternative of Latin America, centered around Venezuela and Bolivia. It's a different model in global trade. And that the educational system in the United States, yes, we want it to be free. College should be free. It should absolutely be free. This student debt ripoff scheme has got to end. But a lot more things have got to change. We've got to be training people to think for themselves and think critically. We've got to be orienting people toward things like science and technology. There's a lot of things that need to change in the United States. The university system is kind of a concentration of a lot of the problems we're having as a society.